Well, good morning, everyone. Time to get started. Good to have you here. Welcome to all of you who are with us online today. We have walked with Jesus now through the upper room, and then in John 14, 15, 16, maybe 17, we've seen him as he made the trip from the upper room to Gethsemane. We've observed him in the garden, and we have seen the Jewish and Roman soldiers come and take him captive after Judas betrayed him with a kiss. From there, they have taken him to Annas, the power behind the power, and from there to Caiaphas, the high priest. And Caiaphas then to the Sanhedrin, and from the Sanhedrin to Pilate. And Pilate, trying to get rid of him, found out he was from Galilee and sent him to Herod. Herod wanted him to do some parlor tricks for him, and he wouldn't do it, so he sent him back to Pilate. And that's where we are today. We are now back in the court of Pilate, and this will be the last part of the trial before he is sentenced and taken for execution. So we pick up our text. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." I don't know how you deal with dreams today. Most of my dreams are so idiotic that I'd pay no attention to them whatsoever if I remember them at all. Most of them I don't remember. But, of course, as you know, in first century and in many cultures, even today, dreams are very, very important, and people pay great attention to them. Probably Pilate's wife interpreted that as a sign from the gods, and she was very, very upset about it, and she communicated that to Pilate. And in the Chosen series, especially on TV, they make a considerable deal about her influence on Pilate and her communication to Pilate of her concern about these events, and a lot of that was because of the dream that she had. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion." Just a brief word about Pilate's wife, and of course we don't really know anything about her from Scripture. According to tradition, she was named Claudia Procula, and I'm probably not saying that right. She is said to have been the granddaughter of the Emperor Augustus. If that's true, then she was of noble birth. The Gospel of Nicodemus, which is one of the Gnostic Gospels, I believe, right, David? Mentions her as being sympathetic to Jesus. And I asked one of the AI programs to give me a picture that kind of depicted her part of the story of Jesus, and they came up with this olive tree, which I thought was interesting. A lone figure twisting in the wind, bearing fruit that no one will taste. Her pleas to Pilate eventually went unheeded. So I thought that was a rather interesting way. Origin suggests that later she became a Christian. I have no idea if that's true or not, but that's what Origin was, one of the second century, early writers of the Christian movement. Anyway, more than you wanted to know about Pilate's wife. Pilate said, I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. So he just made the assumption that since Herod dumped him back in his lap, that he couldn't find any reason to bring judgment against him either. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him. And of course, we know that punishment was usually scourging. Punish him and then release him. Now, it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. And a man named Barabbas was imprisoned with the rebels who had committed murder under the insurrection. So the crowd went up and began to ask Pilate to keep his custom. Barabbas, I think if you broke the name apart, Bar is son of, and Abba is a title of God, of the Father. It's kind of interesting that he would be. I don't know if you could say the name translates to Son of God, but it was Son of the Father anyway. Kind of interesting. Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Pilate asked. For he knew it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over. Isn't that interesting that he could see through it when their own people couldn't? But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas to them instead. They shouted back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now, Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. One of the other translations said that he was actually a part of a murder that had happened. But the whole crowd shouted, away with this man, release Barabbas to us. Which of the two do you want me to release to you? Asked the governor. Barabbas. They answered, Barabbas, give us Barabbas. Well, what shall I do then with Jesus who is called the Messiah? Pilate asked. They all answered, crucify him. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. They really had a mob mentality going, didn't they? This whole conversation between them and Pilate is just surreal. It's just so strange. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again. But they kept shouting, crucify him. Crucify him. For the third time he spoke to them, why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then release him. You understand that this is a combination of all the four Gospels. So if it sounds a little redundant and a little disjointed, it's just because it wanted to get in all of the pertinent facts. And so it's a little bit repetitive in places. But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified. And then it says their shouts prevailed. There's a verse over in 1 Peter 2. For God called you to do good, even if it means suffering just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in his steps. He never sinned, nor ever deceived anyone. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. He personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds, you are healed. That's the gospel. That's the good news. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. This, I understand, it was customary in cases of crucifixion that they would often do this. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it shortened the time on the cross because there was so much trauma involved with the scourging. Whips were made with small pieces of metal or bone at the tips. Such devices could easily cause disfigurement, serious trauma, ripping pieces of flesh from the body, loss of an eye. In addition to causing severe pain, the victim would approach a state of hypovolemic shock due to the loss of blood. I've read that people died from the scourging. It was. Did any of you all see The Passion of the Christ? The movie, it's been a while back now. Who was it that did that? I've forgotten. Mel Gibson, that's what I was trying. Mel Gibson produced that. The whole thing was very realistic and very professionally, cinematically done. But I think the worst part of it was that when they did the scene on the scourging, it just went on and on and on and on. And I mean, it was just so graphic.
It's like the soldiers had fun.
Sorry?
They displayed it like the soldiers had fun.
Yeah, the soldiers were enjoying what they were doing. It was sport for them. I don't doubt that was the case. This was a cruel time. And the Roman soldiers were not known for being politically correct or any other kind of correct. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. He's already bruised and beaten and bloody. And they stripped him and put a scarlet or a purple, depending on your translation, robe on him. And then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. This is likely the thorn bush. Would you pronounce that for me, David? Jujube, how about that? We'll go with that. Common in that area of the world. As you can see, it would make a very uncomfortable crown to wear. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. So they took the staff out of his hand, and then with the crown of thorns on his head, they hit his head, driving the thorns even more. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." So he's taken him now, and he's punished him with a scourge. The soldiers have made mockery of him, and he brings him out now again out in front of the praetorium and shows him to the people, and he comes out and says, "Here's the man. He's wearing the crown of thorns. He's got on the purple robe. Here's the man." And I'm sure that Pilate was hopeful that there would be a change of heart and a change of attitude. As soon as the chief priests and the officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." So he took him, and he was crucified. Then the chief priests and the officials said to him, "Crucify him!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him. The Jewish leaders insisted, we have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. He said, where do you come from? He asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. The Jews condemned him for claiming to be the Son of God. Pilate's already wanting out of this. He wants out of it because his wife told him to, for number one, and that shows he had still a grain of intelligence about him. But he's wanting out of it because he sees that it's all out of envy and just false accusations on their part. He wants out of it now even more so when they talk about him being divine. He's trying every way he can except stand up and just be the leader that he is and says no, he didn't do that. A few hours later, one of the Roman guards who had likely been present for his conversation is going to declare what? Truly this was the Son of God. Likely one of the guards who was standing there when Jesus confessed to Pilate that he was. Given Pilate's conviction of Jesus' innocence, his wife's urgent plea, the unsettling association of Jesus with divinity, it is not unreasonable to suppose that had Jesus spoken in defense at that time when Pilate asked him about that, he might have, I don't know, we'll never know, but it might have been the final straw that Pilate said, okay, I'm going to stand up to this. This is ridiculous. But he made no defense. He was silent before him. Of course, had he done that, had Pilate said no, then history would have changed. Do you realize, or do you refuse to speak to me, Pilate said. Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? And Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. The one handing him over to Pilate was not Judas. It was Caiaphas. Caiaphas was the ultimate power among the Jewish leaders. He was the high priest. Now, he may have been acting on behalf of Annas, but he was the guy. He was the top dog. So it was him who ultimately handed him over on behalf of the Sanhedrin. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar's. They knew how to close the argument. This was the one thing that Pilate could not ignore. The emperor was Tiberius. He was the stepson of Augustus. He was the second emperor of Rome. He said, anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. Pilate, I don't think, was on very good terms with Caesar already. He's had some run-ins with Caesar. Caesar is his boss. Caesar has complete authority over him and all the rest of the Roman world. Caesar's not a good guy. He makes no hesitance in bringing capital punishment against those who disagree with him. Pilate's one job is to keep the peace. Well, two jobs. He has two jobs. He has to collect taxes and he has to keep the peace in Jerusalem, in Israel. That's his job. And they're saying, now, if you don't agree with us, then you are not a friend of Caesar's. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. No friend of Caesar. The Jews hated Caesar. They didn't care who was Caesar's friend, but this served their purpose. They hated Jesus more than they did Caesar. They hated Jesus more than they did the ones who were holding them captive in Jerusalem. They dropped their religious accusations, charging him with the one thing Pilate could not ignore. What did they convict him for? Supposedly for blasphemy. That was the official cause. They convicted him for claiming to be the Son of God. But they have changed that completely now. Forget that. He's guilty of placing himself above Caesar. Pilate had already come to the attention of Tiberius in a bad light. He couldn't risk another mistake. So he finally is going to give up. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. I don't know exactly where that is. There's 2 or 3 different places that are suggested that it might be. There is a place on the Temple Mount, on the southeast corner of the Temple Mount, that is the Antonia Fortress, which is where the Roman soldiers were garrisoned. And it's possible that that's where they brought him. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. And he said, "Here is your king." But they shouted, "Take him away. Take him away. Crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. And then this is perhaps one of the most incredible things that they said during this whole farce of a trial. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priest answered. Do you understand what they're saying? We have no king but Caesar. Wow. To say we have no king but Caesar is to acknowledge Caesar as God. Because by that time, the Roman emperors, Augustus and now Tiberius, had come to be known as divine. You could do a lot of things in Rome as long as you brought incense to and paid honor to Caesar as God. We have no king but Caesar. What a thing for Jewish leaders to say. Complete violation of the Shema. You remember the Shema? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Complete violation. And that's the prayer they prayed every morning of their life. Complete violation of the first commandment. You shall have no gods before me. How do you think Herod felt? We got no king but Caesar. I said, hey, what about me, guys? Don't you remember me? Of course, he was appointed by Rome, so they didn't have a high regard for him as king anyway. But in title and in fact, He was the appointed king of Israel at that time. He didn't carry much weight. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, which is the one thing he cannot have. He cannot have an uproar. He can't lose control. He took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood, he said. It is your responsibility. Washing hands is to show a sign of, as a symbol of innocence, was not unheard of. Deuteronomy 21:6, if a person is found dead in the field, this is somebody who dies and nobody is witnessing it. They don't know who the witness is, if there is any. So they don't know how he died, but they find him out there in the field. This is the procedure of how you deal with that. The elders of the nearest town, so you measure the distance from where you find the body to wherever the closest town is, and then that town becomes responsible for it. The elders of that nearest town are to break the neck of a heifer by a flowing stream. This is part of the way of shedding in or showing innocence. Then all the elders of the town nearest the body shall wash their hands over the heifer. They take it down by the stream, and then they take water from the stream and they wash your hands. The heifer whose neck was broken in the valley, and they shall declare, our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. So it's one example of washing your hands. Of course, that's come into our vocabulary now, and it's kind of an idiom. If we are losing an argument and we want to clear ourselves of any blame, well, we say, well, I wash my hands of that. And it comes, of course, from this. Psalm 26:4, I do not sit with the deceitful, nor do I associate with hypocrites. I abhor the assembly of evildoers and refuse to sit with the wicked. I wash my hands in innocence and go about your altar, Lord, proclaiming aloud your praise and telling of all your wonderful deeds. It's an interesting gesture, but if I were Pilate, I wouldn't put too much credibility in that having sufficed.
I was fortunate enough to have Paul Faulkner as one of my Bible teachers at ACU, and when he talked of this incident, he says he can visualize, no matter how much that he washed his hands, his hands were still bloody.
Yeah.
It was just blood, not water on his hands. He said he can just visualize that.
Uh-huh.
That he's never going to get that. He's still guilty.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know why, but I was thinking about Macbeth. Was it Macbeth who was it that said, wash their hands and was complaining, shall these hands ever be? What was that? You remember that, Dan? Huh? Lady Macbeth, yeah. She couldn't, the more she washed, the more it looked like blood. Come on around, Jeff. Anyway, that was Pilate in desperation trying to weasel out of the guilt that I know he was feeling.
He is the powerful, awesome, eternity, and he is the first powerful eternity.
Absolutely, and
we can't do.
And ordering his death, you can't get rid of it by washing your hands.
You can't give it up.
You got it. Thank you. And this, I don't even know how to deal with this. they're so wrought up, they're so engaged in this, and it becomes so out of control. They've been shouting, crucify him, we have no God but Caesar. If you don't kill him, you're not a friend of Caesar's. And Pilate says, I'm innocent of the blood of this man. And their response is what? Let his blood be on us and on our children.
As usual, my mind can go anywhere, and as I see this, because it just doesn't make sense. But it needs to be somewhere in the Old Testament that his blood would cover all, and be a prophecy of salvation and them not knowing it.
Yeah, I'm sure if we look for it, David will probably pull it up here in a minute. This has been a hugely impactful passage.
But their response is prophetic, because his blood is on us. And it cleanses us. His blood cleanses us. So that God looks at us and he doesn't see our sins.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I'm looking at it just a little bit this morning, and not to belabor it, but just because it is what it is. I don't have an anti-Semitic bone in my body. I love Israel. Got good friends in Israel. And we know what our obligation is to all people. But this passage in history has been the battle cry and the justification for the greatest atrocities the world has ever seen. I don't know, and I've studied it and gone back and forth and argued myself about God's relationship with Israel. Israel was God's chosen people. When we come to the cross, we enter into a new covenant with God. But how has God's commitment to Israel persevered post-crucifixion, post-AD 70? I don't know. I do know that some 30 years after they cried, let his blood be upon us and upon our children, Jerusalem fell with a total devastation. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps as high as 1 million, Jews were killed. Hundreds of thousands more were carried into captivity. I'm not saying that's an answer to their prayer. I don't know. And in this case, it wasn't Rome's justification for doing it. Rome didn't care one way or the other. This had to do with them creating a disturbance and a rebellion against Rome. So Titus came in and took care of the problem once and for all. But throughout history, this statement of the Jews, let his blood be upon us, has been the battle cry for unbelievable atrocities. I'm not saying it's right. It's not right. There's nothing right about it. But it's been used by people to justify the things that they've done. I asked one of the AI programs to create an image of this, and I thought they did a really good job of depicting the after effect of this, with Jesus in the middle of it weeping for the Jews and weeping over the people who committed the atrocities. I also asked for a search about how many Jews have died where this particular verse has been used. Historically, evidence shows that this verse was used as a part of the justification for doing what they did. And came up with a total number of Jews killed in the last 2,000 years where this, what's called the blood curse, let his blood be upon us and upon our children, was documented as being part of the justification for doing what they did. And the number comes up to somewhere around 500,000 until you get to the Holocaust, and then that brings it up another 6 million. And of course, Hitler and everybody associated with the movement against the exterminating of the Jews published, wrote, proclaimed, they are the killers of Jesus.
It feels to me like the cycle that the Israelites were in, where they would, since Moses, where they would occupy the land, then they would disobey God and they would be punished, and they would repent and come back and they would be restored, and then they would disobey, and the cycle repeated itself over and over again throughout the Old Testament. And it feels like what's happening in modern times is just a continuation of that cycle. Israel became a nation in 1947. They've been at war ever since with everybody around them. And now they have ceded part of their territory, which God gave them. And it feels to me like he's continuing to allow them to suffer and be punished because of that.
Well, it's a really good point, and I've thought about that and wondered about that a lot. And I'll have some more to say about it.
It's really important, though, that we realize that most of the Jewish nation did not want Jesus
Absolutely.
to be crucified.
It wasn't the Jewish
And
people.
it wasn't really the Jews. It was the leaders who were doing their rabble-rousing.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there were a curse, which I don't really see it that way, but if there were, it would really be on the Jewish leadership,
Yeah.
not on the people. In fact, you look at what happened just 50 days later, 3,000 Jews said, what should we do? And they became
Absolutely.
Christians. So, and Paul talks about how that
We're going to get to that.
hardening has come upon part of Israel.
We'll read that in just a
until
minute.
The Gentiles come in, and then, I'm sorry, I was talking.
We're coming to it.
So, yeah, but there's a hardening that's come on
Yeah.
part of Israel until the Gentiles.
We're going to read it.
Yeah.
Okay. As usual, he's 2 steps ahead of me. It's all right. I'm just telling you history. I'm not telling you I agree with it. And there's no reason to you can't justify any of it. None of it is justifiable for a number of reasons. But here's your passage. Romans 11:1. Did God reject his people? Now remember, this is Paul. When's he writing? This is maybe 30 years after the crucifixion. but before the destruction of Jerusalem. 30, 35, somewhere around 60 AD, 10 years before the destruction of Jerusalem. Did God reject his people? By no means. I am an Israelite myself, a descendant of Abraham from the tribe of Benjamin. God did not reject his people whom he foreknew. Then down to verse 11, again I ask, did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. But if their transgression means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will their full inclusion bring? This is a tough passage. I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. Understand now that we've got the Christian church, the ecclesia, and who are the first members of it? Jews, right? The 3,000 in Pentecost were all Jews. Jews have come into it by groves. And now Paul is bringing in the Gentiles. Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles, and they're coming in large numbers, and they're trying to figure out a way to work together. And there's conflict. I don't want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. You Jews, I don't want you to be conceited. You Gentiles, I don't want you to be conceited. Don't you want you to think you're better than the Jews? Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved.
I hope I'm not jumping ahead again.
I'll go
But
ahead.
We have to remember, we are part of the commonwealth of Israel. We are adopted into Israel. And if we think in terms of not being a part of that, then we're rejecting God's overall plan.
Yeah. This is, to me, this is a very challenging passage. The experience, a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. I don't know what that is. Until all Israel be saved. Now that raises some questions. As far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies for your sake, but as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs. For God's gifts and his call are what? Irrevocable. You know what irrevocable means? It can't be changed. So there are three ideas that have been expressed by the commentators that I've read concerning what that all Israel will be saved may mean. And you may have another idea on this, but here are the three that are most commonly accepted, and we're almost out of time. You know, I don't think I want to just rush through this. I think we'll pick up here next week because it's an interesting question and it's an interesting discussion. And I want to come back to your comment too on the Israel state of the 1947-48. I've really pondered on that a lot. Is God still acting in that? Or is that purely a secular historical event that just is in the natural flow of things and has nothing to do with God's promise to Israel? It's an interesting question, and I want to spend a little bit more time on it. All right, well, we're going to call it a morning. Thank you for your comments, and have a wonderful God bless week.